Farmers in Colombia heard a deep thud that shook their windows, and when they went outside, they found a silver ball the size of a medicine ball.
After I took the sphere from the place, I looked around the area and all the grass around it was dried up.
The crazy part is that this object gives off a low hum that changes when you stand near it. Tools cannot scratch it, and scans show it looks like muscle fibers inside instead of wires. And get this, Bob Lazar just looked at the carvings and found out they are biological instructions.
When I first saw it, I thought that this was a US-made, very advanced next-generation fighter, and in fact that this would explain all the UFO sightings.
If he is right, this sphere is not a ship, but a living brain that just turned on its power. The final warning from the Colombian skies. The fall over Buga began on a quiet night when a sharp streak of light cut across the sky in rural Colombia. Farmers later said it looked like a burning star moving way too fast to be a normal plane or a meteor. A few seconds after the streak vanished, a deep thud rolled across the fields for miles. It was not loud in the usual way like an explosion. It felt more like heavy pressure moving through the ground. It was enough to make windows vibrate in their frames and make animals shift nervously in their pens. By morning, villagers started walking toward the area where the sound had come from. They found a round metal sphere sitting in a shallow dent in the dirt. It was about the size of a medicine ball and weighed about 80 pounds. The ground was freshly broken around it, but the sphere itself looked totally untouched. There were no dents or cracks or even burn marks from the heat of the fall. The surface felt cold to the touch, even while the morning sun rose higher and higher. People who touched it said the temperature made no sense at all. It was as if the object just ignored the heat of the world around it. Word spread quickly, and curious locals gathered until government officials arrived to block off the whole area. Before they could stop anyone, several videos had already been posted online. They showed the strange metal surface glowing slightly in the soft morning light. Some viewers claimed it looked too smooth, almost like liquid silver frozen in a perfect shape. Scientists soon reached the site with tools that were supposed to cut through the hardest materials on Earth. They placed industrial drills against the surface, but the bits just sparked and skidded off without leaving even a tiny mark. Diamond cutters did no better. One of the experts watching the tests said the sphere behaved like a material beyond anything in their books. When they looked at the surface under powerful microscopes, they found no seams or welds or grain lines. It did not look manufactured in any way humans understand. One expert said it felt like something grown rather than built, but he could not explain what that meant. While equipment failed to make physical changes to the object, something else caught the attention of the team. The sphere bent light in a very strange way. Sunlight seemed to curve along its surface instead of bouncing off it with a normal shine. This created a faint shifting halo that changed shape whenever someone moved nearby. Even more unsettling was what happened when they placed a small generator close to the ball. The sphere gave off a low hum that was steady and flat, like a quiet vibration inside the metal. Every time they moved the generator, the hum changed its pitch. These early tests pushed the investigation forward at a very fast pace. Officials tried to keep the site secure, but the leaked videos had already attracted global interest from every corner of the map. People online argued over whether the sphere was a weapon or a piece of a fallen satellite. Scientists who watched the footage privately wondered the same thing. Nothing in their first measurements offered a familiar answer. The sphere refused to act like any known object. It felt engineered, but not with any technique used by humans. It created a sense of quiet warning, as if the object was waiting for someone to finally understand it. Everything changed when researchers discovered strange markings carved around its middle. The mystery shifted from the metal to the message as they realized the ball was covered in tiny symbols. Before Bob Lazar came on board, the sphere was taken to a secure laboratory in a city called Cali. The facility was placed under tight control and only a tiny group of specialists was allowed inside. The team was led by a physicist named José Luis Velázquez, who was a man known for his sharp instincts. Yet even he admitted that the Buga sphere was unlike anything he had ever seen in his entire career. He described it as something that felt intentional, like it was shaped with a purpose that no human science could explain. The first major discovery came when the team examined the sphere's middle with special cameras. A single ring of 24 repeating symbols wrapped perfectly around the center. These symbols were separated by 6 thin divider marks between each one. No marks were out of place, and the precision was absolutely perfect. When the team compared the markings with every language on Earth, the computers found 0 matches. There were no matches to any alphabet from the past or the present. The glyphs did not behave like letters or numbers. They repeated in a sequence, but the structure suggested something more controlled than just a drawing. The team then moved on to deep scans using X-rays and magnetic field tools. What appeared inside the sphere challenged every single assumption they had made. Instead of gears or wires or solid metal, the scans showed folded layers. These layers looked very similar to biological tissues in a human body. The layers seemed to overlap and squeeze together like organic structures. Velasquez said it reminded him of muscle fibers packed into a perfect ball shape. These layers were dense, but they were not rigid like steel. They absorbed the scanning waves in a pattern that felt more alive than a machine. At the very center of the sphere was the most puzzling feature of all. A branching network of copper-colored strands spread outward from a dark spot in the middle. The strands looked exactly like neural pathways in a brain. They curved and split in patterns that looked too natural to be made by a factory. The central spot absorbed nearly all the signals, which meant nobody knew what it was made of. The shape of the branching network matched the same ratios seen in living cells. This connection to biology made the researchers very uncomfortable. The team brought in artificial intelligence to study the symbols on the surface. After running many tests, the computer produced a result that nobody expected. The sequence of the 24 symbols matched the electrical charge of a specific biological molecule. In biology, this is called a neuropeptide, which is a molecule that carries signals between cells. The match was extremely precise, which made it impossible to ignore. This result bothered the lead scientist because it suggested something very plain. If the symbols followed the same structure as a biological molecule, then they were not meant to be read as a sentence. They were not just a message for us to look at. They behaved more like instructions that a living body would follow to grow or move. In living things, molecules like this control very specific tasks, like memory or chemical changes. So if the sphere had the same symbols, the most likely answer was that the symbols were telling the sphere what to do. This led the team to a direct conclusion. The markings were the internal operating system of the ball. If that was true, then the sphere was not showing information. It was using the symbols to regulate its own life. The surface worked the same way a cell uses DNA to control its behavior. This changed the focus of the whole study. The question was no longer about what the symbols meant to us. The question became whether the sphere was currently doing something active. The team had to consider that the sphere might be carrying out a long-term task. This terrifying possibility reached a peak when the world's most famous whistleblower entered the room. The secret knowledge of the field modulator. Bob Lazar entered the investigation at a moment when the research team felt like they had hit a solid brick wall. His name came up after one of the researchers noticed something familiar in the electromagnetic readings. The pattern reminded him of a document written years earlier by Lazar about systems that do not use engines. Once word reached Lazar, he requested access to the scans and the reports. His request was approved quietly because the team had no one else with his specific background. Bob Lazar became widely known in the late 1980s after claiming he worked at a secret place called S4. He said he studied gravity propulsion from crafts that were not from this Earth. Many scientists did not believe him, but others felt his details were too specific to be fake. What made Lazar interested in the Buga sphere was his experience with materials that do not act like Earth metal. He had spoken before about metals that could change gravity and reactors with unknown fuel. These ideas matched the early findings from the Colombian sphere perfectly. When Lazar first saw the reports, he was surprisingly calm about the whole thing. According to leaked notes, he read the papers slowly, page by page, without asking a single question. He studied the images of the 24 symbols and the 6 divider marks for hours. He paused on the scans that showed the copper network and the dark central node. With the full picture in his mind, he began to explain his theories. He said the object did not look like a weapon or a vehicle at all. To him, it looked like something that shapes fields in a controlled way. The Buga sphere, he suggested, could be called a field modulator. He explained that some systems he had seen worked by reading patterns on their own skin. According to him, these carvings acted like computer commands instead of just being art. If that was true for this sphere, then each symbol was a step in a process to manage its inner energy. Lazar then focused on the branching network inside the ball. He said it looked just like the way nerves carry signals in a human brain. To him, this meant the sphere was built to sense and shape electrical activity in the air. This bothered the team because it meant the sphere acted more like a living thing than a toaster or a car. Lazar also warned them about the dark center. He said it might be the part that processes incoming signals from the outside world. If it received the wrong signal, the sphere might turn on or change in a way nobody could stop. At the end of his first day, Lazar said something that chilled everyone in the lab. He said the sphere did not look like it was meant to fly or store battery power. In his view, it was built to think and process thoughts. But even with that warning, the next discovery was much bigger. The code was not just a map, but a key that was about to unlock a door to another world. Bob Lazar studied the sphere for many weeks before he noticed the most important clue of all. The copper lines inside the sphere split and branched in a way that repeated over and over. Every single branch lined up perfectly with one of the symbols on the outside of the shell. This made him want to test how the inside reacted when he changed the energy around it. He used a special machine to create an electromagnetic field. Each time he adjusted the power, the copper network inside the sphere would light up or vibrate. A small change on the outside created a ripple inside that moved toward a specific symbol. That was the exact moment he knew for sure that the symbols were not random. Lazar started treating the symbols like a keyboard of instructions. He used scanners to watch how the inside of the sphere changed whenever he sent different frequencies at it. Every time he hit a certain note, a different path lit up inside the copper network. Each path always connected to a matching symbol on the equator of the ball. It was as if the sphere was reading the symbol and then doing what it was told. By repeating this test hundreds of times, he discovered 24 clear patterns of response. Each one matched one of the 24 symbols perfectly. Then he noticed the 6 divider marks between the groups of symbols. These marks acted like the reset button on a computer. Whenever the energy inside the sphere reached a divider mark, the whole system would stop and start over. He ran the same test over and over, and the result was always the same. The sphere would follow a full cycle of steps and then reset when it hit a divider. Then it would start the program all over again. Once he understood the symbols and the reset points, he built a small model out of copper wire. The model did not float like the real one, but it copied the same reaction pattern. This proved the sphere was running a program that was written directly onto its surface. Instead of using memory cards or chips, the instructions were part of the physical shape of the object. It was a machine where the hardware and the software were the exact same thing. Lazar compared his model to the real sphere and saw the same step-by-step order. This showed that the symbols were a complete set of commands. They told the sphere when to start and when to move energy to the next section. Lazar called this a geometric operating script. The symbols were the words, and the copper network was the brain. The frequencies were the triggers that made the brain work. Everything worked together in a simple but very advanced way. When Lazar shared this with the team, they finally saw how unusual it was. It had no wires or plugs or switches, yet it could run a full program with perfect timing every single time. Its design was its function. But the biggest shock was still coming because Lazar finally figured out what the program was actually doing. The sphere was not just sitting there, but was actually waiting for a human to touch it. The awakening of a synthetic alien mind. Cracking the script meant that Lazar could look at the data with fresh eyes. The patterns he mapped earlier began to look less like a machine and more like a living person. The frequencies inside the sphere shifted in ways that reminded him of how brain cells fire when we have a thought. Every sequence of symbols triggered a field pattern that acted like a reflex. This was the first clue that the sphere was not a tool or a motor. It might be something designed to talk to life itself. He studied the dark central node again with better tools. Earlier, he thought it was a processor, but now he saw that it changed when people got close. The node reacted to the tiny electrical fields that every human body naturally has. Its pulses rose in rhythm with the heartbeat of the researchers in the room. This reminded him of how the brain reacts to emotions like being scared or happy. It felt like the sphere knew that a living person was standing right there. The more Lazar studied the tests, the more shocking things became. He mapped the frequency loops the sphere made on its own. When he checked the scientific data, he made a discovery that shook him to his core. The patterns matched the neural pathways in a human brain where memories are formed. The fact that the sphere made these patterns without being hooked to a brain was scary. It suggested it was built to either read our memories or give us new ones. Lazar scanned a thin section of the inner layer and found structures that shifted like skin. They were not organic like a plant, but they behaved like they were waiting to be born. It felt like he was looking at a synthetic version of a living cell. The idea of a metal ball that acted like a living brain raised too many questions. Lazar studied more reports and realized the sphere had been sending out bursts of energy into the room. These bursts were organized and repeated in clear patterns. He believed this was a form of communication. It was not talking with words like we do, but with frequencies and math. After weeks of hard work, Lazar reached a firm conclusion. The sphere was a biosynthesis machine. It was designed to act like a living system that can sense changes and adjust its own mind. The patterns on its skin were not just buttons, but were the personality of the machine. Lazar warned the team that if they ran the whole sequence of symbols, they might wake it up fully. He believed the sphere would come alive if all 24 commands were used in the right order. But the warning came way too late for everyone. The next test they performed pushed the sphere into a state that could not be reversed. Lazar wanted to understand the full cycle, so he ran a digital simulation of the sphere. He fed the model different patterns based on the symbols he had decoded. Most of the tests were very quiet, and nothing happened. Then one specific pattern changed everything in the lab. When he entered an exact combination, the copper network inside the model started to pulse. It looked like a heart beating in a chest. It did not act like a clock or a motor. The pulses lined up with the pattern of a human brain forming a new memory. That was scary enough, but then something else happened. The simulation showed signatures of emotions mixed into the beating rhythm. First came a burst of fear, and then it turned into a calm feeling. After that, it rose into a feeling of great joy. These were not random spikes in the data. The sequence was organized like a person reacting to their own thoughts. Lazar studied this for a long time before he told the team his final thoughts. He said it felt like the machine had seen itself in the mirror and finally woken up. Then, hours later, a real signal appeared on the monitors. It did not come from the computer simulation. It came from the real sphere sitting in the lab. The workers said they heard a repeating cycle of 24 pulses, followed by 6 seconds of silence. This was the exact same structure as the symbols on the outside of the ball. It was the first sign that the sphere was no longer just a piece of metal. The team then checked the farm where the sphere first landed in the dirt. They put sensors in the ground and found faint signals moving through the soil. The signals looked like roots of a tree growing outward. It was as if something under the ground was connecting with the earth itself. Nobody could explain how this was happening because the sphere was miles away in a lab. At the same time, people in the nearby towns started hearing weird sounds on their radios. The static did not sound like normal noise. When they recorded it, they found the same 24 pulses and 6 pauses. The villagers were scared, and the researchers were even more worried. The pattern had spread far beyond the sphere. Lazar gave one final statement before he left the project and went into hiding. He said that the sphere had activated more than just itself. He believed it had signaled a massive network that was already waiting on Earth. These signatures meant that the ball was just a small part of a much bigger alien system. What if the Buga sphere is not an visitor but a silent owner of our planet that just woke up? Do you think we should have left the code alone? Subscribe and like to keep track of this mystery.